Ms. Anais Gordon, Late Remorse, Moral Suffering, and Progressive Awakening of Consciousness. The Testimony of the Spirit. Ms. Anais Gordon, presented in the second part of Heaven and Hell, clearly reveals how spiritual suffering can arise not from visible crimes, but from a life marked by moral indifference, excessive attachment to personal conveniences, and the absence of deep reflection on the meaning of existence. Anais Gordon expresses herself in a state of disturbance and sadness, but with enough clarity to recognize her own condition. She realizes that she has lived more focused on herself, on her immediate interests, and on maintaining a comfortable life, without real attention to the needs of others or to the deeper demands of moral consciousness. This recognition is painful, but essential. Modern depth psychology helps to understand this picture. People who avoid inner confrontation and live in constant emotional distraction tend to postpone the maturation of consciousness. When these distractions cease, as happens after passing, the mind comes into direct contact with what has been avoided. Suffering arises not as punishment, but as a result of the absence of inner elaboration throughout life. Spiritism clarifies that Mrs. Anais Gordon does not suffer for having committed great evils, but for having lived superficially from a moral standpoint. Conscious omission, discreet selfishness, and refusal to commit to higher values also generate spiritual consequences. When consciousness awakens, it recognizes these gaps with clarity. Modern science reinforces this logic by showing that human development requires a conscious confrontation with one's own responsibilities. In psychology, systematically avoiding deep existential questions tends to generate late crises of meaning. On the spiritual level, this crisis manifests as moral suffering, while consciousness reorganizes its values. Another striking point of the testimony is late regret. Anais Gordon realizes that she had time and opportunities to reflect and change, but chose to remain in her comfort zone. This regret, although painful, already represents a step forward as it indicates that consciousness has begun to awaken. Suffering at this stage has a clearly educational function. Spiritism teaches that this state is not permanent. As repentance transforms into a sincere desire for change and a willingness to learn and make amends, the conscience gradually frees itself from suffering. There is no eternal condemnation, only a process proportional to the degree of clarity achieved. This testimony also invites us to reflect on a frequently overlooked point. Living without doing harm is not the same as living by doing good. Spiritual evolution requires more than moral neutrality. It demands conscious engagement with one's own transformation and with the impact of one's choices on others. Mrs. Anais Gordon represents many common consciences who do not see themselves as bad, but who also do not fully take responsibility for their own inner growth. Her account reminds us that future life does not demand heroism, but rather coherence, moral attention, and a willingness to grow. Reflecting on this testimony is an invitation to move beyond superficiality and to look honestly at one's own life. Self-knowledge gained now prevents unnecessary suffering later. Consciousness does not punish but teaches, and the sooner we learn, the smoother the path. If this testimony helped you reflect on moral omission, regret, and the awakening of consciousness, like, share, and leave your comment. Your participation helps this message reach more people.